that way that you feel for your high school team or like your middle school team, even that is like the biggest game of your life, that doesn't change. The more you go, like if you can hold on to that feeling, I still feel like I felt more nervous against like our rival, like North Hall High School in Gainesville, Georgia, than I did when I was like playing for my life. I felt more amped for that game than I felt when I got like a big league spring training game or something like that. You know, it might be a different feeling, right? But like those feelings going into a game like is kind of what allows you to be able to, I think, like master this game day in, day out. Is you almost like are like striving to get that feeling. You end up like getting addicted to that feeling, and like that's what kind of pushes you forward, which I think is a cool thing about sports in general. Even in middle school, that feels like the biggest game of your life. Like accept that. Sick, you know, like let it be. Like that's tight, you know. Like
I hope.
Yeah. Like.
Night Pitch episode 23. As you can tell by the setup that we've got here, a little bit of a different configuration, but all the more special because we are joined by some absolute royalty right here. I'm Justin Wick, he's Evan Johnson, and joining us in the middle of the screen is the pride of Gainesville, Georgia, the pride of the University of Tennessee, alumnus as a player of both the Detroit Tigers and the San Francisco Giants organization, and currently an assistant coach at the same university as our co-host, Evan Johnson. We've got these two gentlemen representing Youngstown State University. We're here to show a ton of love to our special guest on episode 23. Show some love to our guy, Will Maddox. Will, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. How y'all doing? It's a pleasure to join.
Right here. I feel out of place as the host of the show. Like I should be the one with all of the guests here. Like the co-host is now the one that's coordinating with the special guest on the same couch right here. So Evan, without further ado, I want to give you the full floor because this is your guy. You are spending every single day with him. He's your right-hand man, actually literally your right-hand man right now. There you go. So tell us, from the supporting member, you're of course part of the program routinely. This is you. This is what we do. Tell us the inside bits that we need to know about Will.
Well, okay, first, you've never met somebody more baseball than Will. You've never met anybody more baseball. I mean, okay, so I guess it might just be where my personality is, but between you two, I've never met anybody more baseball. So, like, Will is very, like, game-centric, player-centric, and you obviously have a love for, like, the production side of baseball. Obviously, the playing it, too. But, like, Will is very much invested in, like, how to play the game, different philosophies, what to do, staying up to date with the latest news on players. And, Wick, you romanticize baseball in a way that's very unique from like, more than most people I've ever met. So it's kind of cool because I got, like, two of my favorite people in the same room. So it's exciting.
You know, I knew that just in the 20 minutes or so that we spent doing all of our sound checks and getting this all coordinated and ready to go, I understood, based on everything that Evan has told me about you, Will, that you and I would be getting along just fine. But after a certain point, like, I had to say, let's actually hit record on this because we could have probably had an entire half an episode just on the sound check alone to begin with.
Oh, yeah. So I feel like it was pretty instant. It was an instant connect.
We have already established this guy as a routine guest, and he hasn't even finished his first episode. So that's when you know it's going to be a good setup. So Mr. Maddox, of course, joins us, as we mentioned briefly, talking about his playing career. He spent parts of 6 seasons throughout minor league baseball. He spent 3 seasons in the Southeastern Conference, which, for those of you familiar with the collegiate baseball scene, you will readily know that is as good as it gets. He also grew up in a little town called Gainesville, Georgia, which is just to the northeast of Atlanta, and as you can see, representing with the hat right here. There you go. So I do want to kind of cover this because I think this is really cool as part of the development of, Evan and I really launching this site, launching our program, launching our show. We have mapped out all of the different locations of where we have played. Of course, Evan and I kind of coincided in the Midwest, and then we ended up playing through there. I have established more of kind of the West Coast or the Mountain Time Zone. We're putting Will's map together, going, all right, where are all the home teams that he's been a part of? And literally up and down the East Coast and throughout the entirety of the South, Will has pretty much made sure that we have covered every corner of the continental 48 states now. So I also want to say this with the emphasis that serious baseball happens in the South, as pretty much all of us know. If you look at perennial College World Series appearances, it all happens in that pocket of the southeastern United States. So you were a product of growing up, of course, in greater Atlanta, just outside of the city, where serious baseball really comes through. And I say this very selfishly because, one, I'm jealous because that's baseball headquarters as far as I'm known. But I do want to ask you, as far as what you really feel like you got to take advantage of where you grew up. What were some of the luxuries that you really felt came from growing up in Georgia like you did?
Yeah, I mean, I felt lucky because I didn't realize it till I was older. But I mean, every single travel ball team kind of runs through Georgia, right? Like at some point, some shape or form, you end up in Georgia, and so like I didn't really understand that because I mean, being young, it was travel ball was kind of just getting kicked off, and then like I realized that our biggest tournaments are in Georgia. Then I got older, and it was like, oh, like even if you were from California, kind of like where I'm from because everyone's heard of East Cobb and everyone played in WWBA, and like I kind of came up in that era, so like it was cool to kind of see that and kind of go through that chaos. But I was I didn't have to stay in a hotel for a week. I just drove back and forth.
You're literally waking up in your own bed in front of some of the most highly visible amateur settings that you could possibly
Exactly.
be playing.
Exactly. I was an hour away, thinking that was like inconvenient, not knowing that, not realizing that there was teams from California and Texas that flew in or took a charter bus.
Is it true that when you were playing high school spring ball, you guys would play more than 30 games in the spring? Is that right?
Yeah, I think our regular high school season was like 25. We would start in February. And then I think our regular season was 25, and then the playoffs would kick off after that.
Evan, how many games did you play in Iowa in the middle of the spring?
Oh, not very many, dude. Because we played summer ball. Iowa doesn't do spring stuff. So, I mean, I guess when you got to high school, everybody stopped. I mean, everybody stopped playing the like travel ball stuff, unless you were, you're doing something different. But we play mostly in the fall. We play a lot in the fall because it got really cold in the spring and it would never turn over till your high school season started. So
yeah, no kidding. That's funny. Me growing up in just outside of Denver, Colorado, I'm pretty sure there was one spring when I was in high school that we played 11 games, like just because the amount of snow that was on the ground, and we had a cutoff date when the last day of school was. So I can recall, like, of course, me growing up in kind of the travel circuit as well. The amount of trips that I took to pretty much Will's backyard in order to see what was taking place, and then to see how so much of that would come through. It's, I would argue, a superpower just to be able to develop that type of knowledge. And I think that it's really cool when you're able to have conversations with people that are coming from those types of backgrounds, because baseball is just normal there. And sometimes you'll go to different settings. Like Evan, I know you and I talked about this on our last episode, that you'll go to certain big league markets and you just see a serious reverence for the game. Like if you go to St. Louis, or if you go to the Wrigleyville neighborhood of Chicago, or if you go to the heart of San Francisco where there's some diehard fans involved with it. I think it's really cool when you also recognize that in the South, it's a very unique breed that it also exists in the amateur game as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's certainly progressed through Will's career too, and I know that he will attest to this of, you're a product of the SEC. You're the first guest that we've had on the program that played as a home team in the Southeastern Conference, which means we definitely want to tap into all of the conversations that exist here. You were at the University of Tennessee for 3 years on one of the nicest playing surfaces in college athletics. Kevin, I think I speak on behalf of both of us that we are vehemently jealous of the crowds that you got to see on a routine weekend basis.
Oh, dude, it was beautiful.
So I just want to open up the floor as far as, especially, we're in the thick of course, the College World Series is taking place right now. All of these SEC venues were on display throughout the regionals and the super regionals. And you were, as a product of the South, Evan, you and I have talked about when we're finally jumping into some of these bigger venues, we haven't really been a part of it before. But Will, with you really growing up in that neighborhood, you had certainly a lot more of a refined knowledge of college baseball than I would have in Colorado, for example. So when you finally got on campus, and Evan, we've talked about our junior college debuts were probably the most nervous that we ever were. Will, you're jumping right into one of the biggest college venues in America, and you're going right into it like this. So I want to kind of cover this. I know I was nervous for my first junior college fall scrimmage, and it was on an Arizona Diamondbacks spring training backfield in front of maybe 6 people. All of a sudden, you're jumping right into this, and it's, people live and breathe SEC baseball in those parts of the country. So I just kind of want to discuss when you first arrived on campus, or potentially into the first few weeks of your collegiate career into the spring. What was that acclimation process like? Was it everything you kind of anticipated it would be, or was there anything that really surprised you once you got there?
I mean, dude, it was crazy. Like I grew up in Georgia. Obviously, everybody was a Georgia Bulldogs fan. So I initially was like, I had to decide between. I ended up really having to decide between Georgia, Tennessee, Coastal Carolina. End up choosing Tennessee. Got a lot of hatred back home for that. But fell in love with Knoxville. Going into it, you really don't know what to expect. But then my first SEC game was like in Athens on a Friday night, and it gets hyped up a lot, but you really don't know. And then it was like, oh, the SEC is about to start. You got to lock in. And I remember, like, I batted leadoff in Athens against Alex Wood, and thought obviously like he's very good. He's like throwing 94, 95 or whatever, and just thinking like, oh, okay, this is the SEC. I was able to look back later and be like, no, this was actually like a first round draft pick. That was very good, or wherever he got drafted, I don't know, but. So I think that was kind of like my welcome to it, where it was like, oh, wow, everybody's going to be like this. And then, you kind of go through the gauntlet of it and realize that, these are places that I was familiar with, but I didn't really have a real feel, I guess, for what it was going to look like playing in that conference at the time, so that was the interesting part.
It's pretty cool for you to be able to jump in the fire like that, particularly back home in Georgia too. And you realize, yes, there's still a difference between SEC caliber pitching and then the top 50 of MLB pipeline is a little bit different as well.
Exactly.
There's still a little bit of a higher tier on this.
Well, exactly. You sit there and you just think, okay, well, this is just what it is, right? And then you can, then you're able to like kind of go back and be like, oh, no. These were like, a different level guy, right? Like by the time I got to Saturday, it's like, okay, no, I think I can do this, but like after the game on Friday, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, oh shit, here we go,
Sitting in a Friday game before the bullpen has even started moving, and you're like, damn, is everybody going to be
That's
like
exactly
this?
what that's how I felt. It was just like, oh, okay, this is the SEC, It's like, no, this is a left-handed pitcher that throws 94, 95, like as a left-handed hitter, like this is going to be a tough matchup, like I probably would have been able to realize it like 2 years down the line, but right off the bat, it was just like, okay, like this is the SEC. Like everyone said it was going to be hard, so here we go. So kind of jumped right in.
Credit to you though, like being a left-handed hitter, them still deciding that they're going to make you lead off against the left-handed number one like that. Like, I mean, you can feel pretty good about yourself, realizing, all right, I might be a little deflated after the 5th or 6th inning of this one, but I still got at least a little bit of momentum that I got this conference patch and they let me do left on left out of the gate like this.
How did you do that day? Do you remember?
I was 1 for 4. I think I was 1 for 4 with a walk or something, but we got beat, and I know we didn't score a lot of runs. I don't know what the score was, but I know we didn't score a lot of runs, but it was like, I don't know. I didn't even really know how to feel. You're so nervous going into it that it's like almost hard to reflect on, because it was like, I knew that I was going back home. I had a lot of friends there, you know, and it was just like, you know, it's hard. You can't really like realize the situation you're walking into, right, until like years pass, and then it was like, oh, that was pretty cool, you know.
Yeah. You know, that's amazing too. You think of the different layers that get factored into this. Like, I'm not trying to insert my own stories, but I don't think I played a college baseball spring game within 500 miles of my hometown. Like, that didn't happen. And you magnify on top of this, I also probably played in front of 10% of the crowds that you did when you were in college too. So I've thought at length, you know, as a player, you really want to reflect on certain things and you want to learn and you want to take something away from everything. But sometimes I almost feel like the best lesson is just to let things be and just kind of treat something as like an acclimation process. Like, you don't want to walk away from your first SEC game saying, yeah, Alex Wood absolutely shoves. And now I need to, like, all right, what did I do? How did I get into, like, no, you're allowed to take a breath and you're allowed to be a human and all of these types of things. But I also can understand, you know, when you're playing in front of that many people and it suddenly becomes that much more normal too, of course, over time, it's not exactly normal on square one either. So you're factoring in probably one of the most raucous crowds that you had ever seen at that point in time, with one of the most electric arms that you had ever seen. You're trusted with the leadoff spot, and you're going to bed that Friday night thinking to yourself, all right, do I want to like get all in my head about this, or do I want to just take a breath to realize that this game comes and goes? But at the same time, you know, part of the reason I wanted to mention the amount of volume of games that you were able to play in Georgia when you were in high school is because you really can't simulate that amount of workload. Like, I was always envious because I was fighting snowstorms and I wasn't able to get the consistent work like you were just naturally where you grew up. So I think that especially in the game of baseball, the ability to turn the page and realize that you don't need to find a deep lesson in everything. Sometimes it's just keep putting yourself out there and keep getting the repetitions that you need. I will attribute part of the reason I was very over analytical is because our games were so few and far between when I was growing up, just because of the way the weather was. So all the while you continue to persevere through the season, of course, and now all of a sudden, not only are you playing the longest seasons of your entire life at this point, you're getting to game 40 and game 50, and then you're playing in an SEC tournament, and then you're making it into a regional. And again, you're playing against the best pitching that college baseball has to offer. So just as kind of a compare and a contrast, that opening series versus Georgia versus, you know, let's say the last 2 weeks of that SEC schedule, what do you feel like the biggest differences were for you?
I mean, I think just being able to think, you know, like I really think it's like, it really like as simple as like being able to actually like process a game, you know,
that's true. Yeah.
You know, like it's as simple as that might sound. It's like, that's really how I felt, where it was like that first start of it just felt like such of a blur, right? Like really just trying to stay in the lineup, right? Trying to find ways to be able to consistently stay in the lineup, try to find ways to win. And then I know like by the end of the season, it was like, okay, now I can actually like think about the game again, you know, like, okay, this is how they're trying to pitch to me. This is what they're this is how we're mixing and matching it. This is what it really actually feels like. You know, I think like that first part, you're just trying to I'm trying to figure out who I am, where I'm at, you know, and like find a way to stay in there and continue to bat leadoff or continue to be able to play second base, you know? And so it's like, once you get settled in, I think it becomes a lot easier. And like, that's where I feel like my best memories probably come back in, probably because I wasn't all sped up and I could actually like process a game and like knew that I was going to wake up and my name was going to be in the lineup, you know, and be able to try to attack a game plan or something like that instead of just simply like survival mode. You know, I feel like early on it was just survival mode, which, you know, sometimes you almost play better in those situations because you can't think. Like I'm like, can't think, like I can't even remember them now, right? I can't even process
there's a lot of truth to that. We saw a lot of good examples this year with some of our freshmen.
Oh my gosh,
we had some of our freshmen like early on when they were thrown in the fire early, they performed really well.
They were fine, and
then as soon as they had enough appearances to where then they started to be able to think about it, some of them took off and then some of them struggled. It was like as soon as they got to think about it for a second and try to game plan and overdo, then it was like, oh boy, here we go.
Exactly.
Now he's thinking too much. Let's get back to being nervous.
The art of performance is one of the most obscure things, and it is so like surreal to try to evaluate this too. Like I was writing about this just the other day, trying to think about, you know, sometimes the best thing to do is just to come into something with zero expectation.
Absolutely.
And I know that goes against planning, that goes against everything that you think that you need to do in order to bring your best. But like, honestly, there's some shows that I've hosted, or I've been an MC holding a microphone in front of a couple thousand people, and I was reached this like breakthrough when I was speaking in front of a couple thousand people. And I think there's a lot of parallels between playing about this, but I'm like, all right, this is it. There's going to be people here. There's going to be executives, a lot of people I know. Like, I'm going to be standing at home plate, projecting out to everybody my spoken words. And then I'm like, all right, well, don't memorize your script. Don't like be rigid. Don't be formal. So some of the best advice I got, a very good friend of mine, I'm telling him all this. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to come out of the gate and we're going to be good. We're going to get a nice tee shot off and we're going to coast through the rest of the night and people are going to know who I am. He's like, dude, you realize that nobody like came here for you. They came here for the event and nobody's going to care how foolproof. They're going to forget about this. Just give them something to remember and move on and then see how it goes. So I think that it's amazing because it took me that realizing, like you mentioned, sometimes you just need to think. It's like, all right, what do I feel like I need in order to feel comfortable? Well, that's kind of a subjective analysis. But at the same time, what do you need in order to just be able to be a human again? And I think that's a very difficult thing for people to come into. Evan, I want to bring you into this. And Will, as you certainly know at this point, Evan and I, former college teammates, we did not have the luxury of playing in the Southeastern Conference, of course, but needless to say, we were in a mid-major setting. We would still draw some pretty good crowds on occasion. It was never to the level that you were, of course, but Evan, I want to talk about where you came from because, of course, you were in the Northwoods League before you got to the Division I level, where there are some pretty good crowds there. And then I know we've talked at length about probably your biggest collegiate outing was a regional against the Adley Rutschman included Oregon State Beavers, where it's an elimination game. There's over 3,000 people in there, and we're coming from, I don't know what the attendance was at the Big East tournament, but it was far from Hoover, Alabama, where Will Maddox is used to. So, anyways, Evan, I want to bring you into this too, because your story, it's a little bit different. Yes, we got some decent crowds at Creighton. It wasn't SEC decent, but we'd get a little bit there. But now all of a sudden, this is at the back end of the year. I understand elimination games for anybody is going to be a different animal. But what was it for you realizing that the crowds were heavily backloaded in the sellout percentage? Was that a little bit of a different story than maybe Will has?
I don't know. I mean, there were certain situations, especially when we got to big crowds, I almost liked it more. The tough thing about TD was that we would have like 2,000, 3,000 people there. But there's 2,000, 3,000 seats between the dugouts, in the lower bowl. Because it's huge. The back is just like so sloped, so shallow that there's so many people. But then when you got into those environments where you could actually like feel a crowd, it almost felt a little better. It kind of took the pressure off. It kind of made it feel more like
That's amazing, isn't it?
Dull. And it was exciting. I liked it. I mean, there's some guys that I know that are similar to that, and then some guys that I know that are different. Where they get that bigger crowd and they respond differently, and then some of them really, really enjoy it and struggle when the setting is super low.
Sure.
I just always thought it was fun. I always thought it was a lot of fun to play in front of a lot of people in more high pressure moments. And like, of course, when you're young, it makes you nervous. Like, of course, when you're not ready for that, it's going to make you nervous. Like, I remember the first time stepping foot in that environment, especially coming from a mid-major or coming from a JUCO, that environment felt huge.
Yeah.
I mean, my first fall scrimmage at a JUCO felt like the World Series. I was nervous
Amazing, isn't
as
it?
hell.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, yeah.
And then eventually you start to feed off of it. You start to like it if your mind's in the right place. And that's something that you can feel like you use to your advantage rather than, something you feel like you have to avoid.
Sure. Like the trajectory of growth across so many different levels. And I mean, that's always an encouragement that anybody that's tuning in, it doesn't ever need to stop. Like I understand, playing careers eventually come to an end. And, on the backside of playing, of course, I envy the fact that, I want to be able to still go out there and perform in front of a bunch of people. But it's so cool when you realize that there really is no limit to continuing to putting yourselves into those situations. And then all of a sudden you're doing things that you would have never thought possible, all because you continue to jump and you continue to put yourself in those settings. I do want to highlight another thing, and this is maybe a little bit of a funny context, but Will, you go from playing at the University of Tennessee to you're an 18th round selection to the Detroit Tigers. You make your professional debut. You go throughout the lower ranks of the minor leagues, and I don't mean to say this to bash organizations like the Lakeland Flying Tigers, but Lincoln Nelson Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee has a lot more lively energy than Joker Marchant Stadium in Lakeland, Florida in the middle of June, for example.
Oh, I mean, dude, we might have had 10 guys at our games when I was with Lakeland. I really think that there were some games where we had 10 people,
Man.
in a big league spring training stadium.
Yeah.
Like I could hear guys talking in the dugout from the field.
That's the worst, dude. That is the worst, especially as a pitcher. That's the worst.
It's the worst. There's nothing worse. It's even when I was in college, it was like I liked to play on the road because it was loud. Like we had more fans on the road, and so then you get to the minors, and it's like, especially in Lakeland, I mean, nobody came to the games. Nobody. So you could hear everything. You could hear the other team. You could hear our dugout. Like, I don't know, anybody that talked, you could hear.
Just a mess. Well, and you're in the middle of, no disrespect to that area of Florida, but predominantly an older audience too. Like you're going from these college settings. You got the hill at Ole Miss that people are losing their mind out here. You got people chanting ball 4 and ball 5 at Texas A&M, and you're like, I've been in the thick of this, and now all of a sudden you're in the middle of a retirement community in Lakeland. You're like, this is not exactly what I was accustomed to.
No, but not even close.
You keep progressing through, and it's almost surreal to think that that's the highest level of ball that you have ever played at that point in your life, because you look around and you see the environment, and it's night and day compared to what you were used to. So, on the other hand of this, I understand that it's very challenging to get yourself up and ready to perform in certain settings like that. As a performer, when you were in environments after that was what you were used to, was very raucous, lively crowds, and now all of a sudden, you're in the minor leagues, it's a different standard, it's a different presentation, but it's also a very high level of playing. Was there any certain strategies that you would really put in place in order to kind of try to recreate that adrenaline that you might have seen in college?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think you probably try to hype yourself up a little bit more, right? Like in those crazy environments, like you mentioned, Ole Miss, like Mississippi State was a really, really, really cool environment when I was there, because they still had like the outfield was still like people rented the space, right? So you would have like a bunch of just random guys, like trailers or things of that nature. And so like for those SEC road games, like you didn't have to hype yourself up. You were almost trying to slow down a little bit. And then I felt like in pro ball, it was the complete opposite, where it's like you're trying to, obviously it's a job now, right? And like the professional side of it feels a little bit different, but like you're trying to find a way to hype yourself up, like almost like ultra focused on yourself and the team of like, and your teammates, to the point of like, you're trying to like eliminate nobody, right? As opposed to like eliminate a crowd or like quiet a crowd, right? You're like trying to almost like eliminate that, like, I play professional baseball and no one cares, right? Like no one's actually here, So it's like you're trying to tell yourself like almost like, yeah, like I'm a professional baseball, like this is cool, this is your dream, and there's 5 old men in the stadium that are like yelling at you, right? like that's it, like they came to the game to rip on their own team, like. And I think like you just like block it out, and you almost turn it into, try to turn it into some type of competitive advantage of like, no one cares, so I'm going to go out there and perform regardless, instead of just trying to like shut up a crowd of 10,000 people.
It's an absolute fascination to me to see how so many people put these different realities together. But I think that's part of the fun of it sometimes. I understand that it's not quite as fun to be playing in environments where it isn't quite as lively. But I think a big message involved in this is realizing, there's going to be a high school senior that's tuning into this program that's maybe soon to make their varsity debut and working their way through, and is maybe feeling a little bit of trepidation and nervousness that goes into that. But it never really ends. And I think this is the really cool thing, because you see grown men that are making their debuts in the major leagues that still feel this same exact thing. And, this is always a recurring theme that we really bring up, is it's a nice reminder that this is a reminder that we're alive and that we are continuing to progress as humans. And that's one of the coolest journeys, when we map out where all of our guests, or Evan and myself, or anybody that tunes in, when we see everywhere that they've been, every new pin on that map is some new beginning that they had to put themselves in a different, uncomfortable situation in order to make the most of. And sometimes it works out really well, sometimes it doesn't work out the way that you would like to, but it continues to be a part of your story, and that shapes who you are ultimately as a person, of course. So,
No, absolutely. And I think
really
also
cool.
it's like,
I'll go ahead.
like those, like that way that you feel for your high school team or like your middle school team, even like that is like the biggest game of your life, like that doesn't change, right? Like the more you go, like if you can hold on to that feeling, like I still feel like I felt more nervous against like our rival, like North Hall High School in Gainesville, Georgia, than I did when I was like playing for my life, like I still felt like I felt more amped for that game than I felt when I got like a big league spring training game or something like that. It might be a different feeling, right? But like those feelings going into a game like is kind of what allows you to be able to, I think, like master this game day in, day out. It's like you almost like are like striving to get that feeling, you end up like getting addicted to that feeling, and like that's what kind of pushes you forward, which I think is a cool thing about sports in general, right? It's like even in middle school, like that feels like the biggest game of your life, like accept that. Sick, like let it be, like that's tight, like
I hope
yeah like if you're not feeling that way, like you got problems. Like I think too many times we're like, oh no, this is short term, like it's not that big of a deal, and it's like I feel like that's the wrong message. It's like it should feel like it's the biggest game of your life.
Yeah, don't quiet the crowd.
No, like actually like accept it, look around, like get distracted, like listen to that person that's running their mouth to you, you know what I mean? And like you go through all these life things, and like it's a fight and it's a battle, and I think those are the things that help you when you get older, and it's like everyone's telling you this doesn't matter, focus on yourself, and it's like that's not what makes you good, right? Like you see these guys, like playoff baseball feels different than the regular season, right? But like what is playoff baseball? It brings you back to being a kid again, where it doesn't really matter, and like you just want to win. Like those are the best life experiences you can get. Not like a travel ball game at 8 a.m. where like no one's there and you're trying to get a recruit, like you're trying to get recruited to somewhere. And it's like you're hyping yourself up because so-and-so's in the stadium that you saw a hat that might be a scout. It's like, no, like it should feel bigger than yourself, right? And those moments that the game allows you to feel bigger than itself, it's like that's what you really want to latch onto. Yeah. Like that's really what you're trying to chase.
Well, and I'll add too, like there's a reason that we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Will and I. Because there was every part of me in the conference tournament that was sitting there in the fourth inning when it was a big pitch, and I had the buttons in my hands and I'm going, do. It's like you have that same feeling as you get to coach. So like you chase it, if you like it, you'll chase it. And it's a hard part about some people leaving sports, but it's a blessing to be able to do what we're doing, because as much as players try to avoid that feeling, once you're done, you try to keep it in doing something, right? Whether you're doing on-field events or whether you're calling pitches or whether you're coaching third base, you're doing something in that regard. You're trying to chase that feeling of feeling alive.
Something that I think is really funny too is once you've put yourself into certain settings and all of a sudden you're in it again and you start to feel a hint of nervousness. Like not to get selfish on this, but here in beautiful Sacramento, we had a day game with a bunch of elementary schoolers a couple weeks ago, and it was a Tuesday, and I was the emergency fill-in to perform the national anthem.
Oh,
and
wow, dude! Wow, dude!
No, I'm not saying this for my own personal gain here, but anyways, I've done it before. I'm used to this. All of a sudden, I get to the field, it's kind of empty, and I'm like 3 minutes away from getting started, and I'm like feeling nervous again. I'm like, I remember almost hating myself, going, dude, it's a bunch of elementary schoolers. No, you've done this. This isn't. But then I took a breath and realized that like this is actually really cool. Like the fact that you're feeling this, no matter how big or small this is going to be. And I think that this is the level of encouragement and a good message really involved across the board. And Will, I think you illustrate it very well because, you're from thousands of people in the college game to maybe a little bit of a different pro setting where you saw crowds big and small to, middle school and high school, you could have expected crowds that were a little different as well. But across the entirety of the spectrum, you have seen so much throughout your career. And I think that's a really cool message to hear from you is that, no matter where you're at, it always matters. It always matters to somebody. And it's okay to lean into the enthusiasm no matter how big or small that moment may be. So we are going to continue on with some big moments on this program. If I say so myself, perhaps one of the best segments that we've done on this show so far. Thanks to the two guys that are on the right side of your screen right here. We're going to keep episode 23 rolling with our special guest, Will Maddox, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, my friends. We just covered Mr. Will Maddox's baseball journey all the way through high school into the professional ranks and into where he is coaching right now. The college he coaches, along with Evan, is the Penguins, of course. He's coming from a high school mascot. You guys were the Red Elephants, is that right?
That's right. The Gainesville Red Elephants.
I was nervous. I had to get confirmation there.
No. Yeah, the Gainesville Red Elephants. Every time I tell people that, they laugh. They're like, "What?" I'm like, "No, it's sick, dude. It's like it's a sick logo, And like a funny thing was like back in the day, I was told, like I've seen like newspaper clippings of like they used to like walk a like actual elephant down like my like main street, right, like downtown, and they would paint
full real elephant,
and they would paint it red. I think now it's probably like a massive PETA issue, but there would be a red elephant.
There is a real elephant.
A real elephant would walk down the like the square, like the Gainesville Hall County Square.
Yeah,
and like they would do a parade with a red elephant, an actual red elephant. So yeah. That's where I grew up. So it's a good logo.
You know, on top of this, you're coming from some pretty serious. I mean, through the progression of your career, you were a volunteer, you were a flying tiger.
Yep.
You were a flying squirrel. You were a skeeter.
Yep.
You were a harbor hawk. There's another one in there. So, you know, all right, Evan, do we have any that compare? We were Blue Jays. We were Rocks. You were a Power.
I was a Triton.
Rainier. You were Triton.
I was an Aqua Sock. I was a Nut.
Yeah, there you go. That'll work.
Nut.
Oh, wow. Man, all right, this is where you guys take off because I just got a couple college ones that I checked a few boxes.
I mean, dude, I was
behind this. Like
the flying squirrel is crazy. A flying squirrel is crazy. The Richmond Flying Squirrels was a crazy logo. My favorite, other than like, I still believe wholeheartedly that we have the best logo in sport. Like Pete the Penguin, honestly, I think might be the best logo in sports when it comes to color combination and look. You know, like the Penguin is probably my 1-1 other than like the Red Elephants, right?
I mean, the thing about Pete, like the Pete logo,
yeah,
not just the Pete head, but like the full body Pete. And if you could put it right here, that'd be great.
Yeah.
The whole Pete the Penguin looks like mean, but also like cute at the same time.
Oh yeah. Like he's intense, like he's angry, you know. But it is a funny, cool ass penguin, you know. So we had that. The cool ass penguin Pete is probably my 1-1. And then I feel like the Erie Seawolves had a really cool logo. It was like a wolf with like a patch on it, which was sweet.
You know, it's a really good list when I omitted Seawolf. That was the one that
the
I
Seawolves is a really cool logo. Like a really cool minor league logo. Like every time I wear like a beanie or something, like guys on the team are like, "You got to get me one of those." Like it's a Seawolf, man. It was cool. Flying Tigers, West Michigan Whitecaps is a pretty good one too.
With the wave with the eyes.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool
one.
one.
Best minor league hats there is.
It is. It's a great hat. Flying Tigers was good. Gosh, man. And yeah, the Sugarland Skeeters, I forgot about that one too. That's an interesting one.
You know, it's funny too, me living in the world of minor league baseball now, of course. You see the different identities that come through and the different hats and the off-the-wall different types of ideas. And like the special uniforms that with the Sacramento River Cats, we'll have Harry Potter night and we'll have like some teams will do Margaritaville night. And there's all sorts of different wild jerseys that come through this. I guess this wasn't part of the program, but now I also want to know somebody with as extensive minor league history as yourself. And Evan, you factor into this as well. Was there any like really wild jersey that you guys had to wear at some point during your career, and which ones were the ones that stood out to you guys?
Dude, when I was in Grand Rapids and Lowe, gosh, I wish I could find the picture. It's probably out there somewhere. It's a really bad look. But we had an emoji night. It was like a kid's night, and our jersey was emoji. And it was like, how like in the minors, like they're not buying you pants, like they're not buying you new pants for the jersey, right? No. So it was like we had like white pants that were like, who knows how old, right? Like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 year old pants. And then we had an emoji themed jersey. So like every bit of the jersey was an emoji. And like they tried to like auction them off and no one bought them. And it's like, like it's the worst logo that I've ever, like the worst jersey that I've ever seen in my life. Like, and I still have a picture out there somewhere. That was a bad one.
Oh man,
an emoji jersey.
Emoji jersey was really funny.
Wearing these sweet creamsicles at Tennessee, and you're suiting up in the SEC, looking awesome, and then all of a sudden, this is supposed to be the highest level that you've reached to this point, and this is the territory that we're in right now.
Oh, it was all time funny. I wish I would if I could go back and buy a jersey, like that would have been the one I bought just for like comedy, Like I should have gone back and kept that jersey because it was too funny.
Evan, you've had some pretty good uniforms through your career. Like I think you hit a pretty good jackpot for your career progression. Do you have any that even rival anywhere close to what Will's got?
I mean, I never remembered the bad ones. I mean, we had a Star Wars night, like we wore like Star Wars themed unis, but like it wasn't all bad. It was just like a random scene in Star Wars where somebody's flying through space or whatever. I do have though at home every team that I've played for past high school. I have a framed uniform from that team, and then a picture of the team in there, the team roster picker or some kind of picture with the team. Some of them they were championships, some of them it was just like the roster team photo. But one I have. I guess a couple of them are special theme jerseys because I just had my parents buy them from the auction if I couldn't get like the home whites, which I always tried to get the home whites. The West Virginia Power had Death Knight, and it said Power in sign language across the front.
Oh yeah, all right, yeah.
And then I have the Rocks one from
Night for a second. I was like,
I thought that's what he said too.
No, not Death Knight.
He's talking about ears,
just like a bloody jersey.
That would be just a memorial. Yeah. Okay. So then I have the Rocks. The one that's framed at home is the Rocks one with the digital camo and then the stars and stripes on the sleeves. I don't have a lot of crazy ones, but my brother played in Traverse, and one of the jerseys that he got to frame, because my parents are doing it for him too, it's a big wine area in Traverse, and they do a night every year as the Cork Dorks. So the jersey says Cork Dorks, and on top of the Cork Dork letters, there's a little guy running, and he's wearing like what do you call those sandals that are made of leather? They're not slides, like Birkenstocks or whatever.
Yeah.
Like he's wearing those and a sun hat, and his nose is white from sunscreen. He's running across the Cork Dorks. So those are kind of
good move.
Those are some of the best ones that I've had that I own, but not much other than that.
Yeah, it's funny to see how wild different settings will get to, and like different minor league attractions. I know John Oliver's late night show. He did a whole feature that he was talking about different minor league promotions and how wild people are like allowed to get into this. But I think it's funny because you go from, in the collegiate settings, you don't really have that so much. Like, I mean, yes, you'll have different promotions and you'll have, different concessions deals or 2-for-1 offers or different like marketing type initiatives to get people even to college games. But, you get into the professional games and it's a different type of animal because you realize, all right, yes, players are now getting paid the salary to play. They're now leaning on all of these different companies that are realistically, they've corporatized the game that it's no longer the collegiate setting that you're really accustomed to. So, we've mentioned before talking about, yes, the minor leagues is the highest level that these players have played at before, but, you're going to have Emoji Night, you're going to have Harry Potter Night, you're going to have all these different wild promotions at the highest level you've played at this point, and you're not going to see that in a Division I college setting necessarily.
No.
So it's kind of the continual contradiction of, yes, even as you continue to elevate and up the ladder, it still might have kind of a different cadence. And I think that transitions perfectly into, preparing yourself throughout your career. Like, there's a good chance that you're going to be facing a major leaguer on rehab wearing a crazy, wild promotional uniform. It's just the way that it works in the
Yeah.
minor leagues sometimes. And so, as far as the mental framework that goes into this, let's say I'm playing in AAA and we're the cork dorks for some day, and then let's just say Max Scherzer's doing a rehab start in AAA on that same day. Like, those things absolutely happen. So what I think is interesting is when we really look into, and this will lean into the player-focused side of things as far as the preparation that goes into it day after day. The college setting, you're not playing every single day. You might have a couple games in a row day after day, but you're playing 56 games over the length of multiple months in the springtime where you've got plenty of off days in between. You get into the professional ranks, and it's very common that you're playing 6, sometimes maybe even sometimes 8 games a week if you've got a doubleheader mixed in there. So I think that as far as the transition progresses through your career, there's different elements of preparation that you really need to get used to, but you can field ground balls at any age. You can hit in the cage at any age, but as far as the actual cadence that really goes into it, I think that we have two people that are probably the most qualified that I can think of that are both sitting on a couch and very capable of answering this question comprehensively. So I will turn it over to the two of you as far as when you came all the way through from middle and high school through your professional career and now even back in the college setting as coaches like you guys are. As far as day-to-day preparation, what are some of the biggest transitions that you really think exist between the college and the pro game?
I think like even starting in high school, it's like you're leaning on like your coaches, if you were lucky enough to have a trainer, like doing these things to like warm you up and get you ready for the game. And like you almost like dread that part and like I don't need this, I don't need that, like, and especially in high school. And then you get to college and it's very similar where it's like now you have like a little bit elongated warm up, that feels a little eyewash and they're telling you need to do all these things, but you're still kind of reliant on like their warm up or like what they tell you need to do before the game. And then I felt like when you transition into that pro game, you realize like, yeah, we might play a game at 7 p.m., but like it really does take me getting to the yard at noon or 1 in order to prepare, for that day. And it was like, I think every year you start to kind of learn a little bit more of that. Like a big eye-opening for me was like one of my last spring trainings, it was like, we had to be there at, I don't know, let's call it 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Like we had to be there to like go through our warm-up for a spring training day. And it was like, okay, I've been in pro ball for a little bit. I know that I need to like go through my mobility and like do my prep work or whatever. So like I need to get there at 6. Let's call it 6 a.m., right? Yeah. Get there at 6 a.m. Everybody on the big league team is like already in the weight room. It's like Miguel Cabrera is already in the weight room, Nick Castellanos, Justin Verlander, all those guys are like in the weight room when I got there. It's like, okay, well then I guess I need to get there earlier, right? Like that's not early enough. So like the next day I get in at 5 a.m. and it's like I'm still not the first one there, And so then I think like over time, it's like, okay, like these guys are getting here at like 4 a.m. or like maybe 4:30 a.m. just to get ready for like a spring training game. We're like, yeah, on TV, everyone's like, whatever, right? They're downplaying it where it's like they don't care. It's spring training. They're just logging at bats. But it's like, no, like they've been at the field since 4 a.m. And I think like over time, you understand how to like use those hours and why you probably have those hours to like be the best at your job, right? Where it's like, no, I needed to spend an hour of mobility every day, right? I needed to spend an hour of like, I call it skill work now, of like my short hop routine or like my pre-throw routine and then go through all of that. And it's like doing all of that, then it turns into like, this is how I'm ready every day, right? Like you might be tired, but like this is how I'm actually like in the right mindset to compete, right? Where it's like, okay, I've done everything that I need to do. And like that might be a a 10, 11 hour day. I'm not saying there's not time in there, but you know what I mean? Like you're going to the weight room.
That's a full day.
Yeah, exactly. Like I saw it where it's like these guys at the highest level that are making millions of dollars, like they're there getting their body right. Like they're doing what they need to do in order to like stay healthy and like perform. And I think like, in my opinion, like that's the most under talked about thing about like the professional athlete, where it's
100%.
like you know what I mean? Like you're starting to see a little bit of that now, where it's like a kid will like maybe a high school coach is like, well, LeBron James spends $1 million a year like on his body, right? But it's like, what does that mean? It's not like he just writes a check and like his body's good, right? Like that is time. Like that is like a lot of time. Like $1 million worth of like preparation is a ton of time. Like a whole day worth of time, probably day to day. And I think the older you get, the more time you spend on that preparation. It's not less. It's not like all of a sudden you get to this point and like, I'm doing less to play. I think that's what people think a lot of the times, where it's like a guy like LeBron is just like, oh, he's old, so he's just showing up and like playing because he knows like what he needs to do to be like, he's at the top and he knows what he needs to do. It's like, no. Like now he's starting an hour earlier. And then the next year he started an hour earlier. And it's like, that's why they retire probably, right? Because now it's taken, like now all of a sudden you're getting into that range of like, I need to be there at 8 a.m. for an 8 p.m. game in order to feel good, and I think like that's like forgotten in all the madness of like professional sports, where it's like, you think you like do less, but you do drastically more. You learn more about your body. You understand more about your body. And then you know that like, oh, I really do need to be there at 11, right? Or 12 in order to be ready for that 7 p.m. game. And I think that's something that's like, it's obviously different on the pitching side, but it's the same, right? Like in body prep, where it's like what you need to do day to day.
Well, it's like people don't see it because at the highest level of the media they watch, that doesn't make money.
Yeah.
Like showing a guy's warm-up routine or whatever he does when he gets to the ballpark at 11. If it's sit in the hot tub for 30 minutes when he first gets there and that's what helps him, nobody's putting that on TV. You don't see that. You just see him go out and perform in a game. And they're so ready and everything's so hidden because it has to be. It's like down in the locker room. Nobody sees it. There's no cameras that are going there. That you just assume that whoever it is, a big league superstar, just gets to the field, puts his jersey on, and just balls out. It's just not true at all.
Yeah,
I mean, like they were just born completely different, right? Like it's like I think like
supernatural,
because that's what it seems like. Like that's what the media does. It's like, oh, look at him. You go to a game and like for me, like obviously I'm a diehard Braves fan, so it's like Acuna is my favorite player, and it's like you go to a game and like. Yeah, like he runs out 10 minutes before the game, right? In order to like do a couple like generic warm-ups and then throw a little bit. But it's like, no, he's already been doing that. Like he's already actually loose. Like he's just like making sure that he doesn't get hurt going into the game. It's like, it's not like he just got to the field and threw on his jersey and like goes out and like does a couple sprints and like throws 90 feet and then goes into the game. Like I think that's a huge myth in sports, and it's like I don't think the media does enough to like give these guys credit for like what they're really doing, like right, like he might have been there 6 hours before doing treatment.
Well, this is one of the things that like when I was coaching in the Northwoods, that was the hardest thing to get these players to understand, was like,
oh sure, because
I would tell them, I'd be like, when I guess when I first got there, it was like I was assuming this group of pitchers that had already been coached by Sharpie. And I was like, okay, what do you guys do? It was like, do you play catch right before the game or do you play catch before BP? Because the way that you do it in higher levels of baseball is you play catch with the pitchers before BP. And they told me before the game, and I was like, is that what you guys want to do? And they said, yeah. I was like, well, that's just not how it's going to work. Like, that's just not how you're going to do it. Because when you get to the minor league setting, it's like you play catch before BP, then you have those, if you get ready for catch, play your catch, and then you have all that time in between to get ready for the game. And if you're a bullpen guy, you pitch like 6 hours after you play catch that day. It's like two different things. It's like you do it 2 a day every day. You work out, you might go in the game. But if you don't, then you're good. Also, another added thing of the pitchers too is nobody wants to sit in the bullpen with a sweaty uniform on. and not pitch.
Yeah.
That's another good point. Yeah, all the more reason to be throwing during BP or right
Throw,
before BP.
shower, get your hair right, go down to the bullpen, sign some autographs.
You get to look all good. Anybody
Yeah.
that's checking you out in the stands, you'll be ready to go.
Don't pitch that day, just ride the pine and then go home.
Yeah.
You know, that's a very interesting point as far as like you guys have talked about, you know, the underside of what people don't see. I can recall, I think there was an article that was released about Paul Skeens talking about, you know, the underground things that he has to do to be ready to go and the repetition that it requires. I remember, I think Vin Scully was broadcasting a Dodger game that Clayton Kershaw started, and he said something along the lines of, Clayton Kershaw has one day off every 5 days, and it's the day that he pitches. And I loved that because, like, yeah, this dude is one of the
It's pretty
hardest
cool.
working dudes for the 4 days that
Yep.
he's doing to gear up for the start. And then it's almost as if, you know, you can say the proverbial breath of fresh air is the act of actually going out and doing what it is that you get to do, which is competing. And I think that when you develop and you instill that type of mentality within yourself, then all of a sudden you're really excited to see the crowds. You know, like we've mentioned, when Will's all of a sudden stepping in foot inside Georgia facing Alex Cobb, once that becomes normal, all of a sudden you realize all the underlying work that I just put together, it was to prepare me for this, and now I'm here, and now I feel ready to go. And that's the coolest feeling in the world, first and foremost. But I think that, you know, as we've illustrated this about how it is in pro ball, I think something that I think is really pertaining to where you guys right now are as college coaches, there are a lot of NCAA restrictions on how much you can practice. And in the junior college ranks, there aren't so much restrictions, but you kind of have to work alongside what the NCAA will allow. And on top of that, you've got, you know, academic schedules that these kids need to stay on top of. Is there a big difference that you guys have noticed transitioning now into where you are as coaches, having to navigate that landscape? How is it a little bit different? And is there anything that you maybe wish was just a little bit different from the coaching side of things as far as making sure people are able to prepare themselves as much as they are?
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's massive. I mean, I think like that's probably like our number one thing is like we try to identify it as like a culture thing, right? But it's like really like trying to convince a kid that it's like, no, this is actually what you need to do. Like this is actually the part that like should be fun for you. Like this is how you're able to almost like relax your brain and like get ready to play, right? Like if you have that routine, right? And your routine, like I could go talk for hours about like our like game prep, right? For like an infielder, right? Like our game prep of like the short hop routine and doing all that. It's like that matters more than whether or not you get to take ground balls during BP, right? Like on that any given day, it's like it could rain, BP's banged, you don't get to take ground balls. So it's like, how can you be ready? Well, you're ready because of your prep work. Like you've already done all those things. Like you've already taken care of those things. And it's like convincing the college athlete, I think, that like, you know, like if Dansby Swanson's doing this before the game every single day, 162 games a year, like you think that you're better than him? Right? Like he just signed a $175 million contract or whatever it is. And it's like, you can't assume, like you can't think that you're going to be ready when he feels like he's got to do these things in order to be ready. Right? And it's like, I think that's the biggest disconnect, where it's like, it comes from like we're being like mean almost as coaches or like extra demanding, but it's like, no, dude, like this is really what it's about. Like the prep work is the way that it is. And like, if you can buy into that, then you're going to be in a better headspace in order to perform, you know, at your highest capability. And I think that's probably hard. I'm sure you can feel that too.
Oh yeah. Well, it's getting them to use the field that we have. So like just specifically with us, we have a field that's more so, I mean, it is a minor league park, basically. There's a locker room, there's a training room, you have all the facilities you need, everything's there. So like what I always try to do is open it super early in the morning. Just open it and just see who comes in, because you have access to everything. Yeah. And I had some players start to take advantage and be like, hey, can we play catch at 11? Like, sure. So go out play catch with them at 11, and then, you know, they go play the game. But I would get questions a lot of times, like, hey, what time does the field open tomorrow? Or what time are you going to be there? And my favorite response to what time are you going to be there, every time I would get the text, would be like, before you.
Yeah.
Just say before you. Just be like, I will be there for it. I will open it so that you can go do the work you need to do very early. nobody would ever be there super early, but like we were basically setting that up to ask for college players who didn't really understand that part yet to really take initiative and just take advantage of the situation that they had, which the players that do that are the players that play on, and that's not, that's no surprise, and that's part of their routine, and that's why they got there, so they keep doing it. But I think that understanding that the demands of playing at a higher level require a higher level of preparation is no surprise. It doesn't mean that you do less. It means that you do more. And that's, I think, the hardest for them to understand, because I think they think that once they acquire the skill, they're fine. It's not something that they continually need to work on, and they continually need to improve.
Sustainability component that goes to it, sure.
Yes.
Well, I mean, imagine getting called up to the big leagues, right? Like you're the ultimate talent, right? Like you're a first rounder. You get called up to the big leagues. That first day is probably a little bit like depending on like when you fly in. But that next day, like I don't think they're like sending out a group text saying like the report time is 3 p.m. for a 7 p.m. game. Right? Like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but like, I'm just assuming that's how it is, right? Like I wasn't there, but it's like, imagine showing up at 4 p.m. and Paul Skeens is not pitching that day and he's been there for 4 hours. And it's like trying to set that culture in college where it's like, no. Like, this is what you do. Like, you're never the last one, like I know coaches always make like a big thing of like, oh, like you shouldn't be the last one there, or the first one to leave. But it's like, no, really, like you really won't be prepared. Like, how could you be more prepared? Like, why are you better than the ones that have come before you, right? That are willing to put in more time and sign those big deals. And like, they're doing these things. Like, say you're an infielder and I just get called up, like, Dansby Swanson can't beat me to the field. Like, there's no way, right? Like, I'm trying to survive. Like, I'm trying to stay on the team. Like, this is what it is. Like, this is what it looks like. Like, you need to go ask him what time he's going to get there. And if it's at 1, like, you need to be there at 12, dressed and probably sweating, like ready to rock and roll. And I think like in the college game, like we're trying to get there, where it's just like convincing. We're not trying to be assholes about it, right? Like, we're really just asking you to do your dailies in order for you to be able to relax and play the game, and like I think that's what we're both trying to do, where it's like get them ready for the next level, right? Like, if you're fortunate enough to get to the next level, then like they're ready for that and what it looks like, and they know that this isn't just like a show up and you hit good BP and then you play in the game. It's like, there's probably 4 hours before that goes into like hitting good BP and like being ready to play in the game. And so it's like, I feel like that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I think that illustrates a really good point too, because we've talked about when you're joining a new team or you're in a new setting, you want to feel comfortable, you want to get acclimated, you want to realize that you belong there. I'm sure, Will, when you got called up to AA, you're not looking around at the other players and you're showing up pretty much going, I need to show up earlier than the guys that are here because I need to establish myself in this rank that I haven't played at before. You make it to Erie and you're in the AA uniform for the first time around, and if I'm showing up later, if I'm the new guy, if I'm setting the precedent, there's people that are older than me, they know more about this than I do, and I think a big part of the territory involved is realizing that, you're able to feed off of the people around you and you're able to learn off the people around you too. I can only imagine during spring training, you're showing up to the weight room at 5 o'clock in the morning. Castellanos is already there. Miguel Cabrera is already there. You're learning a ton just by seeing those guys there. And, not only the work ethic involved, but I think a good thing to mention on this too is what they're doing and what they're doing to get ready to go. Nice little shout out here to co-host Evan. We, of course, were roommates in college. I heard the door shut at 7 a.m. on days that we didn't have morning weights. And, it's all right, I got a class at 9. I'm going to try to sleep a little bit, get a full night of rest. Maybe I was studying the night before, whatever it was. I would hear the door shut at 7 a.m. like 3 days in a row that we didn't have weights. And I was trying to figure this out, and finally I picked up, Evan was going to our weight room on campus and was doing full mobility series. Mm-hmm. So I heard that once I figured out what he was doing on day 3 or day 4, I would hear that door shut, and I would absolutely hate myself if I heard it shut. I was still in my own bedroom.
Oh, dude, I would give it a little bit of juice for you. I'd give it a little bit of push.
You did it on purpose.
Yeah, I'd give it a little bit of
You
juice.
never told me that part, though.
Not a lot, just like
I
a little bit.
remember,
Like, hey, man.
Well, and I think the joy of this, like what a blessing it was to have a roommate that did that too, because there could have been somebody else that maybe didn't understand the territory or didn't understand that went into it. And I could have thought to myself that, yeah, I'm going to sleep in a little better because that's going to be better for my career. Well, no, the answer was go to bed at 8:30, go to bed at 9,
Exactly.
Go to bed at 10 or 10:30. Budget this into your day, get the full hour of sleep that you need that you would have been sleeping in for, and go do something really cool with it too. So, I think on top of this, you're mentioning you open up the ballpark early. I'll get there early. We'll figure it out. I'm going to be there before you. Let me know when you're going to be there. Let me know when you need any help. But I think the lessons that are involved too, because all of a sudden you get there sooner, and now all of a sudden you're observing something with a lot of curiosity that you wouldn't have otherwise had. I still do hip mobility that Evan showed me at 7 a.m. in our weight room, and it was just the two of us. Like literally to this day, I keep this thing rolling. And, I'm sure that, Will's showing up and Castellanos is probably doing something in the weight room that he's like, maybe I should pick up on a little bit. This guy knows what he's doing. Next thing you know, your curiosity is all of a sudden through the roof. You're finding out new things that you never knew about the game or that you never knew about yourself. And you're applying this in new ways that is going to fuel you for the rest of your life. So I think the incentive behind this is take care of you and show up early, because you never know what you're gonna run into.
Well, you have to
and
be there. Be there from the jump. You know what I mean? And then you're instantly, if you're showing up to a new area, like you can be the first one there, and like that at least shows something about your character. At least you care a little bit more than that next person up. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I think that's something that's so overlooked almost in the game, like really overlooked.
Sure. The act of controlling what you can control. Your arrival time is one of the biggest things, and it's very comforting to hear that these two gentlemen agree on that front right there. That caps off the second bit. We usually cap off these episodes with only 2 segments, but we're going to have a whole lot of fun on the third segment right here, because we've got some gentlemen that know the game, and we're going to kick back and have it a lot more laid back on this third segment, but make sure you don't go anywhere. This is Night Pitch episode 23. We'll be right back. We have a very famous saying in this world of athletics. If you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you play good. We're going to take this one step further. We're going to use this on something that literally everybody in the dugout is going to take a look at. You got to have a good lineup card. Let's make it as big league as possible. We're talking legal-sized paper. We're talking custom teams on the card itself. City, ballpark, date in there. For the most part, these cards are very self-explanatory. Batting order, starting pitchers, bench players, and the bullpen. The nuance of the card itself, however, involves finer details. Each player is listed with the number that corresponds on the scorecard. We covered this in the scorekeeping feature just a few days ago, and here it is in dugout form on the card itself. If a player gets subbed out, that process is very simple. All you do is go in, cross out the starter's name, write in the bench player, and then cross out the bench player's name from the bench placement. You will notice in some of the highest level lineup cards that there are names that are written in all sorts of different colors. This corresponds to, is it a left-handed hitter? Is it a right-handed hitter? Switch hitter? Left-handed or right-handed pitching? The reason this is important is because of a little thing called the platoon advantage. On average, a right-handed pitcher has a slight advantage over right-handed hitters, and vice versa. Left-on-left matchups or right-on-right matchups are something you may commonly hear at the end of games. Managers will often make decisions trying to either set up or avoid. Our last little bit, believe it or not, in the major leagues, there are 3 official lineup cards on field level, 1 in each dugout, and then the umpiring crew also has one because they got to keep order and they got to know where all the players go. It doesn't have to be fancy, but at the same time, it's going to be really cool if it is. Go get yourself a really good lineup card. Welcome back to episode 23. We're capping this thing off hockey style. We're doing 3 periods as opposed to the traditional 2 halves that we've got going on. We're going to cap this thing off nice and short because these fine gentlemen just, We anticipate that Will is going to be a recurring guest on the program, and we don't want to run out of every topic on the first one. So we've already got a stockpile of what we're going to continue to crank through this. But I do really want to touch on, the relationship that you guys have continued to develop. Now, Will, I got a head start on you because I've met Evan a couple years ago, but I can certainly attest to, the things that I learned from him and the things that I picked up along the way. You've now worked with Evan for a full spring season, or a full academic season for that part. You've met each other, if I'm not mistaken, 10 months ago. Is that when you guys met each other?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe a week before the first day of practice in the fall.
You jumped right into it. Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, we started off the episode giving the full background for Will, and deservedly so. And, I want to definitely show some love to the co-host of the program that, anybody that's tuned into this, they're familiar with Evan's story and they recognize where he's come from. But Will, from your perspective, I definitely want to touch on this selfishly because I know I learned so much from Evan in such a quick amount of time. But just as far as what you've picked up on working with him every single day, and especially him being a pitcher and you primarily being, as a position player throughout your whole career, and now this is the mode that you of course coach within. I want to give the floor to you to touch on the perspective that you have picked up from Evan as far as you guys have been working together for now the entirety of a season at this point. What are some of the things that you've noticed from him that you have applied to your own coaching career?
Yeah, I mean, off the rip, the first night that we hung out, it was we were going through throwing programs, and that was one thing that instantly stood out was why wouldn't you do athletic throwing in your warm up? That was it felt like such an obvious thing that I had never thought of, and so right off the rip, that was something that we talked about and tried to customize throwing programs based off of each position. Right. And so that was something that was the first night we hung out, we went through that and it was we bonded over that. And then going into the season, just having somebody that was equally passionate about his craft the same way that I am, but working together to do so. Right. To prepare for a game where it was one thing Evan talked about early on was the defense is the defense. Pitching is part of the defense. And so having these open meetings and communications about how we're going to attack people, I'll set the defense behind you. So we were on the same page going into a game. It's something that stands out to me with Evan, where it's just I think that's super unique. I think most of the time it's probably isolated and the pitching coach is here and offensive coaches here.
Sure.
And you're trying to figure out what that guy's thinking to put your team in the best situation to win, but we talked through it, and so I think the team felt that, and it was something they saw how close we were and trying to figure out a plan for attack day to day. And so that was one thing that stood out, that's very unique from a pitcher to a position player standpoint.
Sure. And, I think the relatability on top of that too, and especially, it's something that I think is really fascinating, particularly within the coaching world, is that you are literally on display every single working second that you have. And all of your players are observing the nuance that goes into how you carry yourself and how you compose yourself. And, it's kind of a blessing and a curse because, yes, it's a revered quality to be looked up to like that. But at the same time, you almost have to be on a lot because you realize that even something that maybe you don't want recognized because you're exhausted or it's the end of a game or, you have to be mindful of the interpretation too. And especially when we're talking about, collegiate kids that, of course, take their craft very seriously, but maybe haven't learned some of the professional lessons that we talked about earlier in the episode. Evan, I will ask you the same question as well, because you've certainly transitioned through your own organization. You guys were, of course, in separate organizations and separate colleges and coming from different backgrounds. But when you ran into Will, I think I remember when you called me within the first 2 weeks of when you were at Youngstown State. And I don't remember verbatim what you said, but you pretty much told me that I needed to get to Ohio and meet Will. Because instantly we were going to figure this mapped out.
Yeah.
So, I know that we've already talked about this at length. And I mean, you speak on the terms, Will, exactly what you mentioned, the cohesiveness that's required to be on the same page with somebody in that sense. Evan, did you anticipate that it was going to be such like an easy interaction at this point? Or, this has been your first full season of coaching because you were, of course, playing minor league ball as early as last year. How did that help you transition into coaching where you are right now?
Um, well, it's interesting because when you show up, you think you're going to be thrust into this coaching world that like you know nothing about. But the fortunate thing we have amongst the staff is that we all played. So it's like, and we're all very new to the whole thing also. So like going into the room, it was like you were walking into a minor league clubhouse of like dudes who had played with before, and then trying to coach a team around that sort of mentality of what you know and what you've experienced. So it was really like quick to pick up on everything, just because of the way that we operated. Was we walked in and we're like, yeah, we all feel like we've played together for years prior to this because of just what we talk about. We all talk about the same stuff, or we all like think about the same stuff. So that made the transition really easy, and I think it really helps us stay on the same page. And I think that we have been on the same page almost immediately, which is nice. But I think we all bring different strengths to the table, which is cool because we all kind of played. We played recently, but we all kind of played in different situations or with different orgs or in different eras, which is useful because we cue the same things, we talk about the same things, but we can communicate them in different ways, or we can add to it things that maybe the rest of the staff hadn't heard before, or like maybe think about it in a way that the rest of the staff wasn't. So then we can combine that, and it creates a really well-rounded way of thinking about the game and a really well-rounded way of thinking about development.
Yeah. It's fun to me because we were talking before the show got started, and we had mentioned that Will spent the majority in his minor league career with the Tigers organization, and then he got picked up by the Giants later on in his career. And he was talking about, you compare and you contrast the different philosophies or the different developmental styles that exist within different organizations. And Evan, like you mentioned, of course, you being in the Mariners organization as long as you were, I can remember when you were in the minor leagues, you and I would be talking on the phone, and we were talking about, this organization does things a little bit differently. This is what you hear. This is what you see. This is what you're used to. And, I remember throughout, of course, I was never in the trenches of the minor leagues like you guys were, but the stories that I have heard from the outside and seeing the differences, I remember when I started working in the Arizona Fall League. That was just a big melting pot of players from all 30 organizations getting thrown together and sharing ideas. And I think about the way that your guys' coaching staff is constructed in a very similar manner, that you guys are coming from different college backgrounds, different minor league organizations. We covered that in the first two halves of this episode, talking about where you guys had come from. But, I wouldn't mind getting your guys' take on just what that means for relatability, because ultimately, you guys are still coaching college kids that haven't seen that side of the game, and rightfully so, because they just haven't got there yet. But as far as what you see in the eyes of your players, because instantly I kind of lit up selfishly thinking, that's the kind of environment that I'd want to play for, is a bunch of minor leaguers that were in the trenches, that are still in the trenches, but are now just trading it in as coaches at that point. That's the kind of thing that I feel like as a player I would just rejoice over, because that's the kind of discipline that I would have wanted as a player. As far as applying it to the multitude of different minds that you guys see in the college game, and you mentioned that a lot of younger coaches that you guys have at this point, some of the lessons that maybe you didn't think that you were going to learn, maybe this early, or maybe something that was unexpected. I'll let you guys take this however you see fit, but is there anything in your first few years of coaching that you guys have noticed that was maybe a lot different than what you first would have anticipated?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think just the knowledge, right? It's like you assume a lot of things, and we're smart enough to understand you probably shouldn't do that, right? But you end up assuming knowledge, right? And I think that's something that we've learned, where it's no, you really need to talk through it, right? The quicker you could get through the BS and have some real conversations, you end up learning that's oh, they were never told this, right? You assume that they're told it because where we got, it's it seems like common knowledge, but it's something that was never told to these this guy, where it's just well, that was something for us that I think was eye-opening this year, right? Like where it's just like, if you could go back in time, like you would probably start over and be like, no, like let's really slow this thing down, right? Like let's not assume that they know these things. Almost like coming from the perspective of like, we didn't want to disrespect somebody, right? That's at the Division I baseball level. But like at the same point, it's like, no, like let's start over and like open this conversation and like talk through that development a little bit more and like what they know, what they don't know, and then have like an honest conversation about it.
Yeah, I'm with that on the same thing. Well, one thing that surprised me the most too was how players would just get distracted. I never thought that like that, because like never assume, like we would have stuff to do, we would have like things for them to do, and we'd give them a little bit of freedom but more information, and sometimes you just look over and be like, what are you doing? How have you been doing nothing for 5 minutes? You know? And I think that there's a blend that needs to happen, because the biggest hangover for us was just assuming that every player was going to be super driven and always doing something and like always being early, like we talked about earlier. Going into like the college world, I think we have to realize that not every player behaves that way, even though we just assume that they should. And that's like, to Will's point, it's like, that's one of the big learning points I had this year, was just never assume that they're going to take the extra step, never assume that they're going to stay focused, never assume that they're going to stay on top of that. And it's not like you're being rude, you know, to hold somebody accountable. You know, holding somebody accountable shouldn't make them feel bad. It should make them feel good.
Sure.
Right? If they're getting distracted, you should let them know. It doesn't have to be mean. But that's one big takeaway. And I think that because we were in that environment where everybody was doing things like that for so long, that there was a little bit of a hangover coming back to college baseball, where it was like we were surprised that wasn't the case. But excited to move forward knowing that and knowing how to handle that balance, because the remedy for that is not just to, you know, make it a military academy. The remedy for that is to build perspective. So that's what we're excited about moving forward, is just trying to build that perspective and build that environment where players who are committed can grow and become the best version of themselves.
Yeah. You know, I think that's a really cool way of looking at it too, especially when you realize the power of inspiration in that sense. And I know that somebody might interpret this as like a negative, you know, never assume, and, you know, maybe we need to speak to them on an easier context. But I think that, you know, if you view that just on the different side of the conversation, and you realize that, you know, they've made it this far, they've made it to a Division I level, and maybe they don't have this knowledge or this skill set yet, which maybe it's not entirely a bad thing, because if they've already established themselves as that good of a player, a little bit of an extra guidance, and even something that maybe should be normal. For example, like we've got two gentlemen on that couch right now that they know how to play the game and they know how to show up for it and the rigors that it takes. But at the same time, if there's a player that's made it to a very high level that maybe hasn't had that level of guidance, you know, I'll say this, for the first thing out of my mouth is I would absolutely send my kid to Youngstown State to play with guys like you, because that's the type of thing that, you know, it's motivating when you recognize that. And you know that it doesn't need to be so rigid all the time, but at the same time, you know, it's how relatable can you be, and how can you give these people what they need in order to ultimately get it. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and I think that's part of the joy of being an instructor in so many ways. But, you know, the reason that we like to do these kind of shows is because we like to inspire people and we like to bring the best out of them. And I feel like that's a very good context when you realize that, you know, not only are there well-spoken people that are doing it like Will and Evan right here, but there's also a lot of incentive in making sure that you come equipped with that humility to continue to try to put your best foot forward, no matter how much you know or no matter how much you don't know. I think as long as you keep showing up for it, just like these two gentlemen right here, you're going to be in a pretty good spot right there. So, as is the case with all of our special guests, Will, my friend, we want to open up the floor for you. Feel free, give us a good 30, 60 seconds, whatever you see fit. We'll just turn the floor over to you for whatever you got, my friend.
Yeah, man, I appreciate this. This has been fun. You know, this is something new for me. This has been fun to talk ball, and I feel like we could go for probably another 4 hours. And I look forward to coming back. But no, I mean, I think like I guess the one thing would be just focus day to day, and like and enjoy those day to days and whatever emotions come with that, like accept them and be okay with them, where it's like I think that gets overlooked. But no, I mean, just having this platform to be able to like talk baseball, and like I think we're all probably weirdos, right? Like to a lot of the outside world, we're like we love this game a little bit more than is normal. It's like it's comfortable for me being able to be weird and talk about the game in a million different ways, and so like I appreciate it. And I mean, I'm looking forward to coming back on. So like, thank you for having me.
I can say without a shadow of a doubt, you will be a return guest on this program, and you are more than welcome. Of course, a big amount of love to my guy, Evan Johnson, for helping coordinate this special guest. Thank you all for all the stuff that you guys put in the world. You two have already cemented yourself as two of my favorite people on the planet, and Will, you did so in record time, so thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 23 of The Night Pitch. I'm your host, Justin Wick. And until next time, he's Evan Johnson. He's Will Maddox. Out.
So here's to life, and every joy it brings. So here's to life, and their dreams. So here's to life.